Thank you. Good afternoon. The Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriation, and Housing is now called to order. For the record, today is Tuesday, June 23rd, and the time now is 3:15. Notice for this budget hearing was disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets. First public notice was issued on Tuesday, June 16, and the second notice was issued on Friday, June 19. The committee will hear and accept testimonies on Bill 282-35 LS, the fiscal year 2021 Appropriation Act as requested by the governor, relative to the Guam Customs and Quarantine Agency fiscal year 2021 budget request. Joining me today is I have Senator Mary Torres Camacho Torres, Senator Sabina Perez, Senator Therese Terlai. I know we had Senator Telo Tairigui. Then on the second level, we have Senator Luis Muñoz, Senator Kelly Mars Taitano, Senator Will Castro, and Senator Jim Mullen, he just stepped out, and Senator Peter Terlai will be coming back in. General rules for the budget hearing. The conduct of this budget hearing shall be as follows. Those testifying on behalf of the agency will be recognized by myself, and they will be invited to the panel. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide my legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopy. Testimony may be read, and lengthy testimony should be summarized. Testimonies shall be confined to the substance. My colleagues and the panel, we're talking about fiscal year 2021 budget. Individuals will be allowed to present oral testimony. Once you're done, you may be asked to remain in the room for questions or for additional testimony as may be desired by members of the committee. Proper form and decorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room for this proceeding. Individuals who fail to maintain proper form and decorum may be restricted from providing oral testimony and or may be asked to leave or be escorted or moved from the room. When you speak, please make sure that the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. Please state your name and title for the record. At this time, I ask the panel from the Guam Customs and Quarantine Agency to rise and for our sergeant at arms to please swear them in. Thank you, Sergeant at Arms. I will now ask the Chief, the Director, Mr. Paredo, to please present his testimony on behalf of the Guam Customs and Quarantine Agency. Sir.
Good afternoon, Senators and members of this committee. I'm going to start out by saying that the Customs and Quarantine Agency is Guam's first line of defense. The mission is to protect our island, its people, resources, while facilitating legitimate trade, commerce, and travel. We enforce local and federal laws, secure our borders, and protect all ports of entry, ensuring the physical and social and economic security of our island. Currently, the agency program entails air carrier fees at the Guam International Airport, inbound cargo documents processing fees at the Guam Air Cargo Terminal and Commercial Port of Guam. This program now serves as the sole funding source.
Excuse me, Mr. Paredo, if you can please state your name and your position and whoever you're with, sir.
I'm sorry. My name is Ike Paredo. I'm the Director of Customs. Again, let me just say that the program entails air carriers fees at the Guam International Airport, inbound cargo document processing fees at the Guam Air Cargo Terminal and Commercial Port. This program now serves as the sole funding source for Customs, Agriculture, and Quarantine Inspection Service at our borders, and is identified as our special fund. And today, I'm glad to be here to present our budget, and hopefully that I can ask all your questions or answer all your questions pertaining to our funding source for this particular program. Thank you. To my right.
My name is James Diaz, Guam Customs and Quarantine, ASO.
Go ahead and proceed.
Mr. Chair, we're ready to answer any questions regarding the budget.
All right. We'll begin with the oversight. As a matter of fact, Senator Peter Terlai, and then we'll proceed down to Senator Therese Terlai, and then going across. Senator Piru?
Mr. Director, thank you very much for your presence and your ASO. You know, since custom and quarantine is funded through special funds revenue, and because your people is being paid out of the passengers fund, I know we're going to have problems with meeting your budget for this, for like almost 6 months from now, right? And I understand that you do have supplemental funding to accommodate and satisfy the money being lost out of the passengers' fees. So can you go ahead and give the chairman of the budget a rundown of just what the administration and you have talked about in regards to satisfying the compensation of your activities? I know that, you know, I've talked to you about some of the things that you plan to do and what we're really trying to do to satisfy the activities of custom and quarantine, but I would like you to just acknowledge some of the dilemmas that you're facing right now and what things that we need to solidify in as far as meeting the requirements of your operation. Thank you very much. And then I'll start with some of the questions later on, but I want you to acknowledge what have transpired between the front office and yourself, custom and quarantine, regarding the anticipation of shortfalls in as far as you know, the revenue that comes in through the passenger's fee. Go ahead.
Thank you, Senator, for the question. Of course, the challenge that we have today is the impact of the COVID-19 emergency epidemic. And of course, our agency is funded through this particular service charge fees. And we've seen that there's been a drastic decrease in the arrival of passengers coming in at the airport. And to date, I can safely say that yes, for fiscal year 2020, we are going to be short about $5.1 million to meet our obligations with this agency. And my understanding is that I have approached the administration and our fiscal team to include the governor concerning this particular shortfall. And they have advised me that yes, they will provide me the funding to meet my needs all the way up to September of this fiscal year.
And that's the $5.1 million that the governor has assured you that she will support you on that one.
Well, that's the information that I got. There's no other way that we can come up with this shortfall. Even if we were going to open up our borders, and of course we are already seeing additional flight coming in, but still, I don't think we will be able to meet our funding requirements for this fiscal year. We'll still be short.
And if I may, Mr. Director, actually you're going to be, in the long run, you're going to be saving several dollars in as far as, I think there's an anticipation of moving out custom from Social Security building over to the airport. Can you kind of explain that to?
Yes, that was part of the program for my agency. If you really look at the budget, a certain percentage of my budget has to do with rent, and that's almost 17% of our total budget was devoted to rent. So what I did this particular fiscal year is that I managed to reduce our footprint at the airport by giving up additional spaces that we don't quite use at the airport, and I reduced the footprint by 8,640 square feet. That's a savings of $723,304 that I can also use to feed my operations at the airport. There's other additional things that I'm looking at and that I have tried to program this year, and that is to also reduce an additional 5,500 square feet of my office at the PAC here and try to move over to the airport where I can find space within my own area there that I'm already paying for, and that's an additional savings of $234,000 a year that I can save and revert that towards operation. So that's what I did so far for this particular fiscal year. But again, due to this particular crisis that we're facing right now, we are still looking at a shortfall to meet our obligation for this particular fiscal year.
And Mr. Director, I know that we've talked about hazardous pay for custom and quarantine, and I would think that with the funding that you have right now, you might have to forego that hazardous pay for now until later on. But if you do have the funds, I'll be happy to hear that you're going to go ahead and do a hazardous pay for your employees.
Well, that's one of the main concerns that I have with my agency, and that is the officers have been dwelling on when and why is it that they're not getting paid their hazardous pay. I've been working with DOA in trying to mitigate this process, and hopefully that I can satisfy the needs because of this pandemic situation, the officers are automatically covered under the pandemic grants that we are using right now to fund the hazardous pay for officers.
Mr. Chairman, that ends my question to the director.
Thank you. And Senator Therese, I have several questions, Mr. Pete Breda, but Senator Therese, please, and then when I start asking questions, I think I'm going to wrap it all up.
All right,
when it
thank you,
comes to
Mr.
me.
Chair.
Thank you.
Just wanted to, so between your maritime operations and the airport, it looks like the maritime operations, there's no increase in personnel planned for FY21?
No, ma'am.
And what's your inspection rate like during this fiscal year at the port?
The staffing requirements, you mean, at the port?
How often are you able to inspect?
Well, there's 12 officers that are assigned at the port right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the officers at the port are responsible for conducting the inspection. Now, it all depends on the process that they're doing at the port. But let me just say this, that at least 13% of all imports that are coming in are inspected.
13%?
Yes, that's the norm for any customs administration, 13%.
All right. We haven't heard in the news any findings. Are they successful? Are they finding? I'm concerned about drugs. Are they finding any drugs trying to be imported?
I can safely say at this point in time, ma'am, since I came in, we haven't yet made an interception down at the port. We're still trying. We're using our resources to try and identify the concerns as it relates to narcotic interdiction at the port.
All right. And so I know that you've brought in additional personnel. I remember going to their graduation ceremony or the ceremony where they were inducted, and about 24, is that correct?
23.
23, and then, so are they all going to the airport, or is this for admin work, or where would they be stationed?
Those 23 officers that graduated 3 months ago are stationed at the airport.
Okay. So the need at the airport is much greater, that
Yes,
you're
at
putting
this
all the people there?
Pre-COVID time, during the pre-COVID operation, it was the airport's demand to staff the airport properly because of the number of passengers coming in and because of the projection that we had during that time back in January, is that we were looking at 1.7 million passengers going through the airport. So we projected to have the additional officers stationed at the airport for that time.
Okay. And with the change of course in the shutdown of the flights, so I know that you receive passenger fees. That's how you get so, but the predictions for that are very poor. They're
Yes.
saying negative right now for 2020, possibly,
To include 2021.
including 2021. And have you received a corresponding reduction in the rent that you're being charged up at the airport? I thought I heard in the news that the airport was giving a rent reduction to some of its tenants.
Yes, I've approached the executive manager regarding the rent relief, and the information that I got from the manager is that because we are covered under a different agreement we're not qualified as what was given to the concessionaries.
So you're,
And I can explain how that is.
so your
But I
rent,
did inquire, and they said that we're not qualified under
so the
that.
same amount rent is still due, same amount payroll still due, of course, has an increase, a hazardous pay, of course, maybe overtime, I don't know, but maybe not. But then, but your fees that you're supposed to be using to pay these off has actually been drastically short for
Yes,
both years. All right, and then there was an article that said that Customs is procuring a customs management information system that has various capabilities, including receiving all airway bills and manifests electronically, and will greatly help in the automation of use tax assessments, tracking of exemptions, and more. What is the status of that?
yes, that's the platform that we're looking at in putting into our organization. It's an automated system designed for customs, and we're working with Bureau of Statistics in getting the federal grant to provide us the funding so that we can start that program.
Oh.
But that's the program that we're working with right
All
now.
right, I was hoping you were going to say it's already in, because my next question was going to be, have we improved the assessment of use tax at the port, of course, and you know, we have audits from OPA talking about the use tax assessments. They think it's inadequate, that we're losing money. Same thing with the tobacco tax, and they specifically cite areas that customs should be increase their involvement. And so I was hoping that information system would help. But so in the absence of the information system, have you increased activity to help us collect the use tax and the tobacco taxes?
Yes, ma'am. What happened is that we've been meeting with Revenue Tax to identify the concerns and the problems that we have with collection. And we've been working with them to improve that system, and hopefully that we can improve the collection of use tax at both cargo and at the port. The main concern that was brought up to my attention is that we do have a concern with collecting use tax at cargo, because cargo is imported differently from the port, whereas up at cargo it's excuse me, it's being provided by freight forwarders. It's known as consolidated shipments, and that's the problem that we're running into right now. Part of the system is that we cannot mandate the forwarders to collect or provide that information, provide us the information of all their shipments that are coming in at the cargo terminal. And we're trying to find what's the best way for us to mitigate that, so that we can more importantly account for all the use tax that are being assessed at cargo. And that's what we're working with Revenue Tax.
So when do you think those improvements will be complete, that you feel very confident that we are collecting what we should be?
Yes, we're doing it now.
Okay.
We're implementing the new procedures at cargo, and hopefully that we can see an increase in the collection of use tax during this
Okay.
fiscal year.
All right, I hope so. If you've got details and you can send us like a specific report on that would be great. What about the K9 unit at the, what is the capacity? Do you have any? The last time I remember, there was only K9 up at the airport, and if they needed it at the port, they had to bring it down, and you were sharing, you know, those.
Currently, ma'am, Senator, we have 4 drug detector dog units, and those 4 are being utilized at all ports of entry. I have initiated, and I'm looking forward in sending an additional 4 by the end of this fiscal year. In fact, we're supposed to be already making arrangement for them, but because of this covert problem that we have, it's kind of put back.
Delayed? Oh,
And
so you're
delayed.
expecting by end of fiscal year
Yes.
2020? That's
Yes.
excellent. Okay, great. I hope that's right.
Yes.
And will the HIDTA certification, is that going to help customs at all? This was announced by the AG recently. I think it's the high
Is the
density
HIDTA?
trafficking. Yeah.
Yes, the HIDA is a program that is ongoing right now. The Attorney General has just completed the application, working with us and the police department in making sure that we submit that application for approval. And that's where we're at with that right now.
All right. If that's approved, what are you going to, how will you benefit?
Well, according to that particular program, they will provide some sort of funding for us with respect to narcotic and addiction here at our territory. So we'll be seeing some sort of additional funds coming in to combat the illicit drugs that we're being confronted with at this point in time.
All right. Well, I want to thank you and your officers for all your work during this COVID period. And I know that you guys were the first one to have to deal with it pretty much in addition to public health, and that you had to, things changed so fast and you had to be very flexible. So I want to thank you for all that work and for being on the front lines for us. I am concerned, of course, going forward, if things normalize with, still drugs. We still have an abundance of drugs, and we'd like to see, as many K-9 units as you can get implemented during this fiscal year. Do you plan to add on to that during FY21?
Yes, I'm hoping that I can also add an additional 2 more during the fiscal year 21.
All right, and yeah, I'd like to see these drug interdiction
Yes.
effective, and of course, the use tax and the tobacco taxes. Okay, thank you very much, Director, and thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Reese. Just a follow-up question. Mr. Director, Mr. Ike, what is the percentage of inspection done at the port? When let's, for example, 100 containers come in, how many containers are inspected out of the 100?
Based on the port, it all depends on the number of containers. But as I mentioned, if you look at the total containers that are coming in, at least 13%.
13% only?
13%.
Do you know if there's a charge that for every container that's supposed to come into Guam, if there's a charge that they're supposed to be inspected? Are you aware of that?
When you say inspected, Senator, we're talking fiscal inspection. There's other types of inspection that's conducted on this particular containers. Risk assessment is conducted. But the physical inspection is what I'm trying to...
No, I understand that, Mr. Prada, but my only question is specifically, if anybody is shipping anything to Guam, do they pay for inspection when they come into Guam, when they're shipping it? The reason why I ask that is that
Yes.
they pay. They pay for customs inspection, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you receive that money, correct?
Say again?
So Guam Customs receives that fee.
Yes, that's
Okay.
true.
And you're only inspecting 13%?
Physical inspection, Senator, but all containers must make entry requirements with customs.
Okay. No, I'm leading on to something that we met last
Okay.
week about, okay? But I'll have Senator Tallo first ask her question, and then after her, it'll be Senator Sabina Paris, and then when it comes to me, I'll conclude the question. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Tallo.
Sijus Masi, half a day, Mr. Director. Thank you so much
Hi.
for being here. And half a day? I didn't know you were in customs. Anyways, just real quick, how many vehicles do you have under your department? Vehicles? Any vehicles?
Vehicles? How many vehicles?
There's about 40
40?
with the undercover and the regular government.
About 30, yeah.
About 30.
Roughly about 30 vehicles.
30 vehicles and all are working in working order?
A lot of these vehicles are old already. A lot of our vehicles were acquired through the, what do you call that program?
GSA? Kind of.
LESO program. That's a program
Okay.
that we worked with the
So of the
federal-
30 vehicles, how many is working right now? Mr. Diaz, that's,
Out of the 30 vehicles, I would say about maybe 15.
15?
Yeah.
15 only working right now?
Yeah.
And do you have a contract with a repair shop, or do you have people on
No,
premises?
we do it on a case by case.
So it's sent to a shop if it's
Yes,
broken?
yes. We did it.
Case by
The money is the biggest thing, but we used to be allowed to have a purchase order like blanket, but not anymore. So first we identify money, and then we look at the needs, and we go get the quotes, and it's a case by case.
Okay.
Most of the vehicles, ma'am, are from the undercover vehicles. We have maybe only about 4 or 5 government vehicles purchased to, the yellow license plate. The rest are pretty much undercover vehicles with a white license plate, but the officers drive it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so of the 15, and how many do you really need? Do you really need for your agency?
Well,
How
that,
many
you
of you-
know, the way we do it up there is each section has an assistant chief, and they request for their needs. But
I see.
I know at the last budget cycle, they were asking for like 30 new vehicles.
Okay, I
Yeah.
see. Okay, thank you, Mr. Diaz. Last question I have is the scanners down for Port Authority. I know that you were looking at some kind of scanner to make the job a lot easier, less manpower needed, and more efficient. Is that still on the books right now to try and obtain this scanner to scan the containers coming in?
Yes, we've talked about the scanners down at the port, and that's the equipment that costs over $1 million at this point in time. And we're trying to do an assessment. If you recall, we are trying to build a container inspection facility down at the port,
Okay.
and we're trying to include that as part of that particular program that we're putting in there. But
Mr.
yes,
Director,
that
I
scanner,
think, I heard that this is going to save the agency so much money by having these scanners on manpower, as well as really detecting any kind of like drugs or anything that's not supposed to be there. It's just, if you do your analysis, a cost analysis based on the over $1 million and how much it's actually going to save the department, I think you're going to find that it's well worth the $1 million going after to show that cost efficiency. So other than that, I feel so bad because when I had a meeting with the governor before we went into lockdown, there were the two agencies or special funds that would be hurt, and one would be, of course, the TAF, and the other one would be Customs and Quarantine. That it's really going to take a blow to this the funding and this budget cycle. So I wish you the very best, and I hope that you've done also something to resubmit, another budget as we move forward, even for 2020. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity. And again, gentlemen, thank you for all you're doing, keeping our island safe. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tello. Senator Sabina Perez, ma'am. And you'll be followed by Senator Mary Camacho Torres, and then Senator Munia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director Pareto and Mr. Diaz, for being here today. So yeah, I guess I'm concerned too about you mentioned 5.1 million reduction in your revenues, and yeah, that's going to be tough. And I'm actually, looking forward to the progress in regards to the CMO that you mentioned for the use tax. How to expedite or how to facilitate collection of revenues that can kind of counter this loss. Also, Senator Talai took my question regarding the high-intensity drug trafficking area certification. So I know that was something that you mentioned in your nomination hearing, that that was one of the goals, was to get that back.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So I look forward to that area improvement and you receiving that. I just maybe just really quick questions. So as far as your staffing, I know there's a lot of vacancies. I mean, considering the financial situation, is this something that you're still going to pursue to help assist with the operations with Customs and Quarantine? Is there still a need to bring in more staffing?
If you look at the budget proposal for 2021, ma'am, we did request for 30 additional officers, and that is because of the funding requirements that we were projecting for fiscal year 2021. But because of the COVID, we have zeroed out all those vacant positions.
Okay.
And I think the only thing I can say right now is that we just have to wait and see how the economy is going to come. And as we continue to see the carriers coming back, hopefully that we can put together that plan again, because our funding source for that 30 position was that in order for us to get that funding, we need to raise our fees to acquire the funding for that 30 positions. But we have, at this point in time, it doesn't look too good for us to continue moving forward with an increased funding source to increase the passenger fees because of the situation that we have right now. So I think that's something that we need to just sit down and think about it, and hopefully that within the next 6 months we can project how the economy is going, and hopefully that we can continue to move forward with that 30 position.
Okay. And just another question about procurement. So there was an audit that was done that was released in 2019 of April, and regarding government Guam agencies as far as procurement training. So what is the status of employees that have fulfilled all 4 modules in Customs and Quarantine? I know that Customs and Quarantine did not respond, so I just wondered if you can provide a status of the amount of people
So
that are involved in procurement.
So the 2 personnel that handle procurement is myself, the ASO, and I have a clerk. So we both went to the GCC. Right now, we just went to Module 1, but for now, with GSA, Module 1 is good enough. We do process procurement, but we did attend the GCC program.
Yeah, because it's my understanding that RFPs are handled by the agency, so that would require all 4 modules.
Yes, yes,
So that,
Yes.
yeah, so that needs to be
yeah.
compliant.
We're working on it because staff shifts and all. But the procurement right now is being handled by myself and the clerk.
Okay. Yeah, so the agencies have to, they're in charge of the RFP, so they would have to
Sure.
be in compliance with all 4 modules. So yeah, I would highly recommend that. And also in regards to planned procurement, since we're in budget time, I think it's important to at least start a dialogue with GSA regarding what are the items that you want to procure, services you want to procure, so that there could be a consolidated
They do
purchase.
they do require that at the beginning of the year. Yes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
yeah, if I could just, as a reminder. So that's all my questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Paris. Senator Torres, ma'am?
Thank you. I want to, first of all, thank you very much for your help, your agency's help with developing the Bill 360, the updating of the manifest
Oh, yes.
laws. I think that that's going to have a very big impact, not only in curbing the drug importation, but perhaps capturing the use tax and other taxes that are applicable to products in Guam. So Suzuz Masi really for taking the time in your agency to do that. I noted in your goals and objectives, you have many objectives in your 4-year plan, and one is the building of construction of a customs house. Would this be the customs house of the Port Authority, or is this something else?
Yes, that's the container inspection facility that's going to be down at the port.
Okay, which the land was already
Yes,
given
that's
over.
the land that was deeded to the agency.
Okay, that's good. I just wanted to note too that I appreciate and I acknowledge, that we always think about what are the bleeding areas, right, where a lot of money is needlessly being spent by an agency, and I think that you very succinctly captured that a lot of it is bled through rental costs, and I see that you've made a big effort in that, and I just want to commend you for working towards applying revenues to more of your mission as Customs and Quarantine. And I also noted here that part of your efforts is to also collect taxes at the USPO, the post office.
At the post office?
Yeah, it says collect taxes at the USPO. Is that the United States Postal Office?
Yes,
or?
that's only for foreign partials that are coming in,
Okay, I see.
not domestic partial.
No, not domestic. All right. I don't have any questions. I just wanted to, note that a lot of what you have in your mission is also the bringing your personnel up to a standard and including fitness, which is always important, right? Because it's mind and body that makes them more efficient and effective in their jobs. But I just want to commend you also for, your efforts in housing customs in places where they'll be most effective in accomplishing their missions. But I really didn't have necessarily any questions other than the clarity on the 4-year plan with the customs house.
The only thing, Senator, I can say is that thank you for that help in trying to amend the manifest portion of our regulation, because the manifest is an integral part of our operation, and it's about time that we really look into that and make sure that we do and make the proper changes as it fits with what we're doing now at the port. So thank you for that.
You're welcome, because one of the things when I was managing the port also we noticed is that you really don't have to file the manifest until 48 hours. And so there's really no way to capture things once they leave. But, it's good, though, that we get a better handle of what's coming into Guam and at least can intercept where there's probable cause to go in and inspect, ahead of the cargo leaving the ports. But I think in addition to that, what we also recognize is that it'll allow us to clear the cargo much quicker.
Yes.
Which makes it a lot easier and less expensive, too, for everybody to just conduct business. So there's no bottleneck at the port, which I think we're experiencing right now, right, sometimes. Yeah, so Sidus Masi for your efforts, and we'll continue to update and modernize the laws, the customs laws, because it'll only make it easier, I think, for you as well and your officers.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator Torres. Senator Muñoz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you mentioned earlier that you're expecting 4 more canine officers. When you have the canine officers in, do you have a certain training period for the human officer to bond with the canine officer? Is that an extra, I don't know how many months for them to work together? I guess there has to be a partnership, right?
Yes, ma'am. Part of the training is that before we send the handler to the training center, we assign that officer over to the drug detector unit, so at least he can familiarize himself with the operation and how to handle the dogs. And then from there, they proceed to the training center and they select the animal at that point in time. So they bond together during that training all the way until they complete the course.
So you said there's already 4. So there you already have 4 officers
we have identified 4 officers that are going to be attending this training.
Okay. Just was curious about that. And then you said that you wanted to add another 2 in the next fiscal year. So we're hopeful that we're going to have 10 total.
Hopefully.
Okay, good. Because that's a great opportunity for us to really nip it in the bud, I guess, pun intended. I have another question in regards to, like, I guess it's COVID related, because I'm not sure if there's been more containers coming in with products that are related to COVID, like cleaning products and PPEs or anything like that. Is there, how quickly are we getting those containers out? Because I'm noticing that it's really hard to fill up the shelves with some of these items. Is that an issue with customs, like personnel, to get the containers out quicker, or?
Yes, under the first 2 months of the COVID pandemic emergency, we had concerns with a lot of this hand sanitizers that were being imported. And what happened is that we were seeing a lot of the hand sanitizers that are being imported that are in foreign language. And we couldn't figure out why is it that all of a sudden these people that are importing hand sanitizers are not complying with the regulations as it relates to the labeling requirements. And so my take on it is that because of the emergency crisis and the demand for those products. If you go to a foreign country, when you talk about manufacturing products, there's two types of products that are manufactured, one for domestic use and one for export use. And so what's been happening is that because of the demand, the export products that are being made to be exported to, especially to Guam and the United States, ran out. And so what these importers were doing were they were taking the products that were manufactured for domestic product and shipping it to Guam. And so that's what happened there. And that's why we held a lot of the containers that were coming in, and we had to call public health to make sure that they review the products that are coming in, because some of the labeling don't really
It's not in English.
match the ingredients inside that. But we have figured that out. Public health, I think we held over 40 containers, and public health managed to mitigate that problem, met with all the importers, consignees, and gave them a specific instruction as to how to bring those products into compliance.
So it's basically,
So-
what's the holdup is basically getting public health to
Yes.
come down and inspect the products. Okay, so, and not just related to
So now we're not
hand
seeing that problem now at the port.
Okay, so it's not just related, it could be anything
It can be
related.
the wipes too, yes.
Okay, so I was just concerned about, the length of time it takes to get the containers out, so it is public health basically then. Okay, that's all the questions I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Senator Kelly?
Afide, Sejus Masi, for being here towards the end of the day and sticking it out with us. We appreciate that. In looking at a few different things, I've been looking at our use tax and what abilities we might have, or whether there might be issues with being able to collect that. Can you explain your roles with Anderson and Naval Station? I believe you have some presence there.
Ma'am? No,
Yes.
we don't have officer station at the. You mean to collect use tax?
Well, use tax, but also whether there's any control on our part with, let's say, any seeds that are coming in or soil that's coming in. Do we have any control over what's going on there, or any presence?
Yes, all shipments that are coming into Guam must be reported as entry requirements for that particular products. And so, yes, we do have control over the products coming in, because they should be coming in down at the port. And there's only two areas that they can come in, the port and airport cargo. So we should have control of those particular items.
Okay, and forgive me, we're all a little muffled, myself included. So forgive me if I didn't hear that correctly. So you were saying at the port, and I think the airport, but so on the bases, is there some interaction with you all so that we understand or have some sort of control over what's coming in through the military, if they're bringing in plant items or seed items or soil items, things like that?
Yes, ma'am. The products that are imported, even for the military base, are coming in through the port. So we do have vendors that are clearing these products that are going into the military bases.
Okay, and you're saying that it's coming in through the port. Is any of that coming in through air cargo? Does that come in differently, like through, I guess, their air stations?
She's
Yeah.
asking,
Do they have any
military,
air
does it come
cargo
into the
that comes
airport
in?
too, the air cargo?
Most of the commodities that are coming in at the port for Guam, for the military, originates down at the port. It comes in down at the port. We do have some cargoes that are coming in up at the airport, but very little.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm interested in those in two levels. One, to make sure that what's coming in is abiding by what's protecting our environment, of course, and our regulations. And then the other is is there any ability to collect use tax with items that come in through the military? Since they go through the port, do they pay any use tax?
Does the military pay use tax?
No, the military don't pay use tax, ma'am. They're exempted from paying use tax. If
The
it's shipped
use
under
tax
duty.
is only for businesses bringing in stuff from the States. Those companies that receive the commodities only pays GRT. We need
Yes.
to understand the use tax and the difference between the use tax and the businesses and the GRT.
Yes. You got to understand that in Guam, we don't have a duty or tariff that we collect. So when we talk about use tax, these goods that are coming in at the port, if the business establishment imports their goods, they're not subject to use tax because they're going to be selling those items under enforced under gross receipt tax. Now, what's subject to use tax is that any type of equipment that they bring in that is not for resale, then is subject to use tax.
Okay, and with that, similarly, there are these contractors that are coming out and bringing in equipment and so forth, but does any of that fall within any taxes that they should be paying, or does that all fall within being exempt as well?
It all depends, ma'am. If the contractors are bringing in vehicles, those items are subject to use tax. Equipment that are going to be used for their project, it's subject to use tax.
And does that occur if they're bringing in those vehicles and those equipment from off island to do contract work? Do we have a system in place that does indeed collect that?
You mean, do we inspect them?
I think you're just gonna tell her that the military is exempted, period.
Well, the military is exempt, but if the contractor imports the product, then they're not subject to use tax. It's the military that's use tax.
Okay, and so I just wanted to make sure that there weren't any gaps there, because some things that I've heard have been a little confusing as far as whether the contractors are indeed providing those, whether they are indeed paying those taxes or not. So the other part also is with the Postal Service.
Postal Service.
Yeah, so are we able to, with the items that are coming in there, is there any ability to garnish use taxes for the items that come in through the Postal Service, or is there something that we could be doing to assist with that?
For the Postal Service, ma'am, we have authorization, or we have the ability to inspect partials that are coming in from foreign countries. All partials coming in from domestic are not. We don't have authority to view and inspect those products because it's considered domestic.
Okay, and so with this also, the last one that I would be asking about is related to tourism, and so we're hoping to reopen next month, and you had talked about the measures that you've been taking to shrink the space that you're using, to increase the uses of those spaces, and so forth. Are there any other measures that you're working on to get us towards being able to receive tourists again? Is there anything for customs and quarantine that comes into play that's going to be different this time around or additional this time around?
Well, there's a protocol in place, ma'am, that has been put by public health, and of course, the passengers have to go to the public health screening before they can come to customs. And of course, yes, we've implemented certain procedures insofar as making sure that the officers are safe, especially at the inspection counters. We have put up shields to prevent the officers from actually physically interacting with passengers. we have added the additional measures to ensure that the officers are provided the safety equipment that they need, PPEs, at the airport. Other than that, unless the destination is identified as hotspots or anything, then other measures will be taken. But insofar as at this point in time, I think there's only one area that's considered as hotspot, and that's the Philippines. And that's where we understand that everybody goes to quarantine. But yes, that's the procedures that's being implemented at the airport.
Well, and it's good to hear that those additional measures are getting into place, that you have the shields and the other measures that allow us to make sure that the officers are safe, and that's getting us ready towards getting back to receiving visitors. So those are basically the items that I wanted to cover for now. So the other questions I had, since we're towards the end, they've been answered. But Sidus Masi again for
Thank you.
taking the time to come down.
Thank you, Senator Kelly. Senator Will Castro, sir, do you have any questions?
I do, Mr. Chairman. First of all, thank you, Director and members of the Customs and Quarantine family, for your role during this pandemic. I appreciate you stepping forward, and inasmuch as you are integral to helping us manage the inbound passengers. We all know that customs is key to facilitating trade in the region and on this island in particular. So, Mr. Chairman, my two topics that I'd like to ask questions are relative to digital customs and also capacity building. Looking back in my 2017 notes, and also I believe, Director, we were both at a 2019 Customs Regional Conference. I'll be drawing from those two experiences. So the Deputy Secretary General of the World Customs Organization at that conference was advocating for the modernization of customs, and not just by way of legislation. I want to publicly thank Senator Mary Torres, and I believe it's a speaker, Senator, who's the co-sponsor to that advanced manifest bill that was put forward. But also, there was the advocation of improvements in policy and operational type of rules and regulations, like the harmonizing, I guess, of codes for certain products. We know that at the heart of that is going to be an improved IT system, whether it's the technology, hardware, or software, but also the capacity centered around that system. With that said, Director, could you speak briefly about what investments have been made in the past year or will be made this year, this upcoming fiscal year, relative to a digital customs in terms of facilitating trade and helping to acquire, manage, and process that data for all types of efficiencies, not just in the control of narcotics, but perhaps in the interception of illicit activity as well in the region that falls within your jurisdiction? So that's my first question, Director. If you could speak to digital customs and anything that you're doing in that regard with your team.
Well, the only thing I can say right now, Senator, is that yes, that's the platform that I've mentioned earlier. It's known as a Customs Accelerated program that is designed specifically for customs, and it will capture each and everything. It would identify the carriers, the importers, the commodities that are being imported into our island. Also, that particular platform will be able to interface with other government agencies, to include law enforcement agencies. The platform also will be capable of identifying all the different commodities that are going through our borders. And where are we at with that? We have requested funding with the Department of Interior to conduct the assessment, and hopefully that's the first phase of that program. And I'm looking forward to getting some information sometimes this year so that we can move forward with the implementation of the program. And that's where we're at with that right now.
Well, thank you, Director. Mr. Chairman, one of the benefits, I guess, of having the incumbent director is he's been there, served with my father in another era, and you're able to come back and assist this administration. Hopefully you can build upon some of the achievements of your predecessors, Colonel Chufris, other customs directors, Mr. McDonald, your colleague as well, your peer, I believe. Also, Mr. Palacios, in terms of bilateral agreements between us and other jurisdictions in the region to achieve exactly that, to harmonize the codification of certain products and services. but in my opinion, in my particular area of interest, for the purposes of shared intelligence, for the purposes of thwarting illicit activity and or narcotics, but also to facilitate trade. And so I thank you,
Yes.
Director. Thank you for that. And Mr. Chairman, my final question would be, what was the, how many customs officers have been hired in the past fiscal year? Were there any improvements within the last 12 to 24 months in terms of the number of uniformed men and women in your department?
We have a total of 27 at this time. We have hired 27 officers.
Okay, thank you, Director.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Castro. Senator Moylan, you have any questions, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the Guam Customs and Quarantine. Just a few questions for you folks. The HITA, the high-intensity drug trafficking, what is your opinion about that program?
The HIDA.
HIDA? HIDA?
Aida? What's the question?
What is your
Are you in
opinion?
favor of
Do you favor
being a participant of that or not?
Yes, I support that HIDA program.
Okay.
I think it's going to be beneficial to the island. It will provide us some resources insofar as trying to combat the importation of illicit drugs coming into our territory. I think the main point about HIDA is that we're also cooperating with not only Guam, but with the CNMI in this particular program, and hopefully that we can work with them in securing this type of program so that we can have the resources that we need to continue to combat the importation of illicit drugs into our island.
Okay. I understand the Attorney General is the one pursuing this. I'm hoping that they're in good discussion with you and you're providing your
Yes,
information.
yes. In fact, I just received an email from the Attorney General the other day and asking my support on the program, and we have responded, and hopefully that we can get that program moving.
Okay. There was an earlier question about that X-ray machine at the port. There's a proposed bill where it's a private partnership, private government, private partnership, and a percentage of the use tax will be paid, used to pay the selected vendor. Are you aware of who will be operating this machine? Is Customs involved in that bill?
I've heard of that particular bill, but I haven't really got into the mechanics of that particular program. I don't foresee anything out of it within the last 6 months. I'm trying to get more information about that particular bill, but I haven't really thought too much about it.
Okay. It was through the governor's office that made the original proposal, so I'm hoping that they would discuss that with you before it goes any further onto the floor. But another question I have is, we just recently mentioned the 27 officers that were hired. How many have left of that 27? Are they all still with the Customs Office?
I think there's only one that has already received notice from CBP, but he's still with us. I haven't received any type of resignation concerning that officer, but hopefully that I can entice him to stay, because he's very much interested with the K-9 program.
Okay. I understand that the initial pay for a customs officer is maybe not as competitive as the other peace officers in the government of Guam. How do you feel about that? Is our customs officer initial pay as a customs officer 1 competitive with the other peace officers in government of Guam?
Well, that's the problem that we have with the law enforcement officers here in Guam. They have different pay scales, and it's something that we're really looking into, because customs officers are really concerned with the status of their position. They couldn't understand why is it that a security officer down at the port makes more than a customs officer. But you know, it's something that we're looking into, and hopefully because of post getting into the picture, that we can probably make the right choice in trying to review the positions, making sure that all these law enforcement officers are at an equal level when it comes to entry requirements.
Are you finding some of your officers may be transferring to other departments as peace officers due to discrepancy in pay?
Oh, yes, definitely, especially customs. We've lost a lot of our officers to CBP, that's the U.S. Customs Service. And I recently, through research, I found out that a customs officer, one, who has completed the academy, graduated from customs, within 5 years can apply at CBP and start as a GS9 without no question. So, you know, I don't blame the officer for leaving for a better pay, but it's something that we need to look into to ensure that we maintain the personnel that we have, and the only way is to review their positions and make sure that we upgrade their pay so that we can maintain them and not just leave them. But let me just give you a figure. Within the last 15 years, a total of almost 25 officers have left Customs just to join Customs Border Patrol agency with the federal government.
Can you explain your process about the hazardous pay that you had to go through in order to provide your customs officer with their hazardous pay?
The problem with Customs with regards to the hazardous pay is that there's a provision in the law which says that officers are only paid hazardous pay if they're exposed to whatever hazardous it is. And so their question is, as a customs officer, you're up at the airport, you're down at the port, you're always exposed to whatever things that are coming in. But the way the law is written is that something just has to happen first, and then that's when you're going to get your hazardous pay. And we're trying to review that, and I've already met with DOA to see what we can do to mitigate that problem, because that's the concern that we have. And we have even crafted legislation to address that. And hopefully that we can get it through.
I think the legislation you're referring to has been introduced. Are you in favor of that legislation moving forward regarding your hazardous pay and the discrepancy in pay scales for peace officers? Would that help support your department to maintain your officers?
That's right. And thank you for that.
You're welcome. Just a couple more questions, Mr. Chairman. Do you have any officers assigned or for the COVID situation, or they're out of your department? Do you have any officers assigned for that?
Yes, in fact, since the COVID pandemic began back in March 15, I have a total of, we started out with 20 officers. Currently, we have 10 officers that are assigned to the COVID quarantine stations down at the hotel, and they're there at this point in time. Actually, it's the police department that's running that program, so we've provided 10 officers to assist the police department in that endeavor, and they're being covered by the COVID pandemic funding.
The federal government requires the customs to do many tasks, right? I would suppose this will be like an unfunded task or unfunded mandates from the federal government. Can you explain some of those and why it's tasking on your department and what makes it basically difficult for you to complete those taskings?
Are you talking about tax?
Task, like your assignments, the federal government is requiring you to do some, like Guam's in a unique situation.
Enforcement of the federal regulations?
Yes, please.
Yes, well, actually, because we are part of the United States, there's federal laws that are applicable to Guam. And so we, as a Customs and Quarantine Agency, have that responsibility to enforce that law. And although we're enforcing the law, we're not being compensated by the federal government at this point in time.
Has there been any discussion to federalize the Guam Customs Office? And would that be something you would consider? Would that be helpful for your department?
Well, I haven't thought about that. And at this point in time, because we are outside of the U.S. Customs territory, Guam is not considered a code of entry for the United States. And that's the reason why we have our own customs administration here, because we're outside the U.S. Customs territory.
If Guam was to become a port of entry in the United States, we would be able to have, there's a benefit to that, is there not?
Oh, definitely, they have the resources. They can probably provide more resources than what we're doing right now, and evidently they'll make that available to the personnel that are here. But other than that,
Okay.
I'm not too sure where we're at with that.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. Okay, I got a few questions, and then I'll wrap it up. Mr. Pareto, the Customs and Quarantine are currently at the airport, correct?
Yes.
You know where passengers come in and get inspected? Do you occupy that whole compound, or is there a lot of space empty?
Well, let me just say that as of February this year, I gave up
Half?
about 8,640 square feet of space that I'm not using.
Which is,
in other words,
equates to what, sir? Is that 1/3, 1/4, half? What? How much space of it?
I would say
Oh, 1/3.
No, it's not
about
that big.
about 1/3 of it.
About 1/3 of the space?
30,
Yes.
The only reason why I wanted to ask these questions, Mr. Pareto, is that number one, you have a mandate to inspect. Am I
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
But you don't have a mandate to be housed there and pay to be housed where you need to inspect. Am I correct?
That's right.
So I'm just very curious that you're required to pay to be housed to do an inspection required by law. Maybe that's something we need to sit down with your oversight and take a look at the airport and say, you only need the space to come and inspect, but you can go elsewhere and rent and pay cheaper. Because I know for a fact that it's cheaper outside the airport than in the airport.
Definitely.
Okay? I just wanted to make that clear statement. Number two, I think one of my colleagues brought up the issue about vehicles. How many vehicles do you have, and how many you mentioned 15 vehicles? How many of them came from the LESO program?
The majority of them. Out of the 40 vehicles in the inventory, maybe about like 8 or 10 are purchased from the government. The rest comes from either the federal program, the asset sharing, which is the undercover, or the LESO.
It's under the LESO. For my colleagues that are not familiar, LESO refers to Law Enforcement Support Office. Those are assets that only law enforcement agency on Guam are authorized to participate with the federal government, where you can attain federal equipment that are considered excess at no charge to Gov Guam. And I'm only familiar with that because I was the LESO representative at the Department of Revenue and Taxation for several years. So I'm very familiar with the equipment on that site. The next one I have is that what type of inspection are we conducting down at the port? Are we doing X-ray, tailgate, or intensive exam? What type of inspections are being done?
We're doing physical inspection. We're doing X-ray inspection, and we're also doing a risk assessment.
Risk assessment. Okay, the only reason why I wanted to lead to that, Mr. Prater, because I know we met a week ago, and that I'm seriously considering and asking and wanted to know what the impact would be if the Customs and Quarantine would fully inspect containers, because many of my colleagues brought up about the drug interdiction, possible cargo being brought in that should be hit with use tax. And I know that many of my colleagues asked the question about use tax. We need to all understand that, number one, when businesses bring in products, they pay the GRT, there's no use tax filed. Number two, when you bring in an item for yourself, if it's found that the item wasn't taxed when you're brought in Guam, you must be taxed on Guam. You can only be taxed one time in the whole life of the product you bring in. And I'm only concerned is that there could be, because you mentioned you're only hitting 13% of all the containers that arrive on Guam. I'm just trying to figure out a way is, how could it be possible for Guam Custom, because I know you need an increase.
Let me give you an example there, Senator.
Yes, sir.
For example, we an average of 2,800 containers are imported into Guam.
Okay.
Of that particular amount, probably about 173 are physically inspected.
How many? 173?
173 are physically inspected. And let me make it clear, because people who say that, why is it that you're not conducting 100% inspection down at the port? There's no way in the world that will conduct 100% inspection of this container. If we do that, nothing will move in this island. Commerce will be impeded, because we don't have the resources to open each and every container, offload it, and move it out of the port in a timely manner. There's no way. That's why we have other types of inspection that we conduct. Risk assessment meaning that when the vessel departs the country of origin, we get the manifest, we review the manifest, we identify the products that we want to inspect. We don't want to waste our time on these products or any impediments to
Or
our
any
island.
threat, right? Or any
We
threat.
want to concentrate on those containers that we feel or importers that are importing commodities that are detrimental to our island. So that is what needs to be understood. There's no way that we can conduct 100% inspection of all the goods coming in. Anywhere in the world, I can tell you that. The norm for customs administration on anywhere is about 13%.
All right, thank you. I was trying to get you to say that earlier, but
Yeah.
because the people of Guam are listening and saying probably, oh, we know how to bring it in. They're only going to touch 13%. No, there's an evaluation
Yes.
where that ship came from, where that product came from before it got to that ship, and so forth. I just want to make sure that people of Guam understand that it's not a free ride when you get on a ship from wherever
And that
you
is
come
true.
from.
And that's why that manifest is very important for
Very
us.
important.
And I thank the Senator Torres for bringing that up, because that's an integral part of the customs inspection.
All right. When was the last time that the custom and quarantine inspection fee was updated? Because I know the one I could find right now is 2010.
The last time the service charge was increased was back in 2012.
2012?
Yes. And that at the time it was 625, I think. It
Was that the same time as when that was submitted by then Colonel Dennis Santo Tomas when he did that study?
something like that. Yes.
Okay, then that originated started at 2010 then.
And
November
that's
2010.
the time that they raised the fee to $829,
Okay.
which is what is the fee right now.
Okay, and have you considered reevaluating if the fee is still applicable or it needs to be increased so that it can cover some of the expenses that you're incurring today?
Yes, we have. We have
Okay.
put forward a proposal, and we're trying to follow the AAA process to increase this fee. We have made an adjustment of what it costs to run the agency. And again, I'm going to refer back to the pre-COVID period back in January, where we were anticipating 1.7 million passengers at the time, and that's how we calculated that proposed fee. But again, that needs to be reviewed at this point in time, because I don't think it's because of the way the economy is going right now. We need to revisit that particular recommendation again. But we do have a recommendation on improving and increasing the fee.
All right,
Yes.
and how far are you so far in the AAA audit, the AAA process
Yes.
you're going through? How far are you on that one right now?
Well, we started the AAA process at the beginning of this year, and because of the COVID, everything just stopped at that time. But we can continue to move on with that.
Okay, I would highly recommend that you just turn it back on and run it, because if the tourism builds up, you're right back to where you were, where you first started.
That is true.
Okay?
So the 13% is the 100 containers that you inspect, like every month?
Full inspection.
That's the
No,
full
a year.
inspection, the 100 containers is that 13%. Do I understand right? correctly?
The number of inspection members, you started with 2,800 and you
Yes,
did?
yes. You
Right.
can pick a number and say 13%
So
of that.
that's the 30%.
Yes,
So people just,
yeah.
okay.
All right. Being that we have completed all the questions, this committee will conclude the budget hearing on Guam Customs and Quarantine Agency. The committee will continue to receive testimony, and please address your written testimony to the Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, and Housing, and submit it via email to Senator Joe S. Nelson at gmail.com. Sizuz Masi for your attendance and participation in today's hearing. And for those at home, thank you for watching. The budget hearing on Bill 282-35 LS relative to the Guam Customs and Quarantine Agency is now adjourned at 4:32. Have a nice evening. Thank you, gentlemen.
Much. Good job.